So a couple of days ago, HBO actually revealed a very brief sneak peek at Lanterns. And obviously the sneak peek was only about 10 or 11 seconds, so we didn't really get that much until I looked a little bit deeper. And I want to point out that I wasn't the only one who noticed this, but I think I'm the only one who's truly connecting all of the dots here. That being said, a lot of what I'm about to say in this video could just be more copium on my end because of how distraught I am at the reality of Hal Jordan being older in this universe. But guys, I have to say there's really a part of me that truly believes this theory with every fiber of my being. So we're not going to do any more unnecessary yap. We're going to get straight into the theory. But before we do that, I low-key just contradicted myself, but that's neither here nor there. Please do me a favor and like, comment, subscribe, and share if you enjoy the content. And also hit the hype button on this video because it would truly mean a lot. Now we're actually going to get straight into the theory. First things first, like I already said, the footage that we got largely shows us nothing. We get a brief shot of Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart walking into what seems to be some kind of town hall meeting in this town that they're going to be doing their investigation in. It then cuts to Jon Stewart walking in some field while narrating, saying that he's trained his entire life for this, and one can only assume that he's talking about being with the Green Lantern Corps. Immediately after that, we then see Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart again walking into what seems to be some kind of morgue. And this is just an educated guess because in this clip that they revealed, I actually do think that we see some dead bodies on the floor that are covered up by like a little sheet. And this just so happens to be in the same exact scene where Jon Stewart is walking in that field. It's also important to note that the main reason that they're even investigating this town is because of a murder that happens there. Following that scene, we cut to a scene of Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart in a car in which Hal Jordan says to Jon Stewart, "You're not ready to get up in front of the class until the ring says you are." Then he proceeds to place his ring on top of the dash and dive out of the car, leaving Jon Stewart to fend for himself. And I'm not gonna lie, this scene is very reckless and very much Hal Jordan coded. And this scene does a very good job of showcasing that in order to become a good Green Lantern, you need to be able to overcome great fear. And what better way is there to overcome great fear than driving off of a cliff and then having to save yourself from said car that is driving off of this cliff. I also want to point out that this is the first line of dialogue that we've heard from Kyle Chandler's Hal Jordan. And some people are actually taking issue with the fact that Kyle Chandler does somewhat have a country accent. Now, me personally, I don't really mind this. In fact, I don't think that Kyle Chandler even sounds over the top country. I can hear it obviously, but I don't think that it's anything that's going to make me turned off from his voice or his portrayal. So I honestly think that we'll just have to wait and see how the overall performance is. That being said, the reveal I think is so important in this scene is actually what Hal Jordan's ring looks like. And I know to some of you guys this may be a reach, but trust me, if you have ball knowledge, you know that what I'm saying right now is not a reach at all. Now, when we look at the close-up of Hal Jordan's ring, obviously we can see a very battle-damaged Green Lantern ring. Now, I don't know if this is because the ring is actually battle-damaged or if this is just the stone kind of design that they went for with the ring. But this close-up actually reveals something that I never noticed on Hal Jordan's ring, and that is this golden yellow outline on his lantern symbol. Now, if you guys remember the very first look at Hal Jordan's ring that we got in the very first Lantern set photo, you can see his ring, but you can't really make it out to be a gold outline. You kind of just get the vibe that it's like a little stone embellishment on the ring that kind of helps the design. But in this close-up, this is very obviously a gold outline, and it's a different color from the rest of the ring. Now, to the people who don't have ball knowledge, you're probably wondering, well, okay, why does this gold outline mean anything? Couldn't this just be the design of his ring? And to that, I would say absolutely not. This can't just be the design of his ring because the Green Lanterns are infamously known for their weakness to the color yellow. Now, this is a weakness that later gets resolved, and I'll explain why this weakness gets resolved because it also ties into the theory that I'm explaining in this video. But before I do that, I'm going to explain why this gold outline on this ring is so important. Firstly, as I just said, the Green Lanterns have always had a weakness to the color yellow. So much so that their rings are completely ineffective against anything that is yellow. And before any of you guys comment on this video, well, okay, actually, that's not yellow, that's gold. I just want you to genuinely put on your thinking cap for 2 seconds and realize that gold is still a variation of yellow, so it would still have the same effect as any other yellow on the Green Lanterns. And Sinestro, who also wears a goldish yellow, is literally the main adversary of the Green Lantern Corps. So the next question is, if Green Lanterns are weak to yellow, why does Hal Jordan have a variation of yellow on his ring? And the answer to that question is, I personally believe that Parallax may already have his grip on Hal Jordan. Now, to clarify, I'm not saying that Hal Jordan has already fully transformed himself into Parallax Hal, who is evil. I'm saying that Parallax has already started the process of corrupting Hal Jordan's mind and plaguing him with intense fear, which for those of you who don't know is actually very lore accurate. In Green Lantern Rebirth, we actually find out that the way Parallax started to take hold of Hal Jordan was literally through his ring, because Ganthet tells us that one of Parallax's tendrils leaked through Hal Jordan's ring trying to take hold. This, in my opinion, would directly explain why Hal Jordan has a gold outline on his ring in Lanterns. And funnily enough, on this exact same page, they actually tell us that the first sign of Hal Jordan's corruption from Parallax was him graying extremely early. And what do we have in Lanterns? A Hal Jordan who appears very old, the same way Hal Jordan appeared as Parallax, even though he wasn't actually old. Another thing that makes this theory extremely likely is the fact that at New York Comic Con, Tom King, who is actually one of the writers of this show, was asked specifically if Parallax Hal Jordan would be appearing in this show, obviously because of the choice of Hal Jordan being casted older. And he answered this question by simply saying that he can neither confirm nor deny. And while you could technically argue that this doesn't really mean anything, I do genuinely believe that if Parallax had absolutely nothing to do with this show, Tom King would have simply said, no, he's not going to be in the show, we're going in a different direction. Because he wouldn't have to actually confirm anything by dismissing the idea of Parallax. He could simply just say Parallax isn't in the show, and then the speculation could move elsewhere. He doesn't have to reveal anything else. So to me, the fact that he goes out of his way to make it sort of vague is telling, because you would only do something like that if the fans were kind of getting close to what's actually going to happen in the show. We've seen James Gunn do this several times. And when it's something that's absolutely not happening, James Gunn has no problem at all completely shutting it down. So now that we've established that Parallax is one of the potential threats of this show, it also makes sense as to why someone like Sinestro would also be appearing in this show, because of his direct connections to Parallax and his influence over Hal Jordan. I also think it's important to note that so far in this universe, we've seen two Green Lanterns in Guy Gardner and Hal Jordan, and when we look at Guy Gardner's ring and also his outfit, there's no trace of yellow or gold whatsoever. So again, it simply makes the gold in Hal Jordan's ring stick out even more. Now, to tie this back to the Green Lanterns having a weakness to the color yellow, this is a weakness that later gets resolved because of Hal Jordan's transformation into Parallax. And that's because in the comics, in search of more power, Hal Jordan goes directly to the central power battery to drain it of all of its energy, but he doesn't know at this time that the emotional entity of fear, Parallax, is actually being imprisoned inside of the central battery. So when he absorbs all of the energy in there, he fully absorbs Parallax, thus completing his transformation. And because Parallax is obviously the emotional entity of fear and is the color yellow, that is why all Green Lanterns up until that point were ineffective against yellow, because they literally had the emotional entity of fear in their main power source. And this again is another reason why the color yellow showing up on Hal Jordan's ring is indicative of Parallax's energy seeping through. So now that we've established that Parallax Hal Jordan is most likely going to be a threat in this series, this can either go a good way or a bad way. Now, the bad way that this can go is if it's basically a carbon copy of Beware My Power from the Tomorrowverse. That movie is the perfect representation of what not to do when adapting Parallax Hal Jordan. Now, based on what we know about Lantern so far, the adaptation for Parallax Hal Jordan already isn't going to be one-to-one with the comics, which is fine. They just have to execute it well and give Hal Jordan his redemption arc afterwards. And that's because sending off the greatest Green Lantern of all time as an evil villain with no redemption arc is part of the reason why people hated Beware My Power, and part of the reason why Parallax ended up getting retconned in the comics in Jeff Johns' 2005 run. So if they're gonna do it in this universe, I think that it's the perfect way to set up Green Lantern Rebirth. And if you've been watching me for some time, you already know that I have been saying this. Now, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I don't even think that Green Lantern Rebirth was actually on the table for the heads at DC Studios. I think that they genuinely were just gonna do Parallax Hal Jordan, have Hal Jordan be killed off, and then replace him with John Stewart. And this decision would obviously be terrible for multiple reasons. Reason number one being that it would be character assassination for not only Hal Jordan, but also John Stewart and Kyle Rayner. And that's because if you kill off Hal Jordan and replace him with John Stewart, you're effectively giving John Stewart all of the main Lantern lore and mythos for the rest of the DCU, which just doesn't work because Hal Jordan is the key aspect of all of the Lantern's lore and mythos. Hal Jordan is objectively the main character of the Green Lantern side of DC. The best way I could could put it to you is, imagine if Star Wars was retold, but instead of Luke Skywalker as the main Jedi, they just replaced him with Han Solo. All of the connections to Vader, Obi-Wan, the Jedi Order, etc., would effectively be lost. And that's essentially the same thing that happens here if you give Jon Stewart Hal Jordan stories, because now there's no dynamic with Sinestro, because Sinestro did not train Jon Stewart. There's no relationship with Kilowog, there's no relationship with Carol Ferris, there's no relationship with Green Arrow, there's no relationship with Barry Allen. Sure, Jon Stewart has relationships with Barry Allen and Green Arrow, but they're not nearly as good as Hal Jordan's relationship with them. And then it's also character assassination for Kyle Rayner because of the fact that after Hal Jordan becomes Parallax, Kyle Rayner is the one who actually takes up the next Green Lantern mantle. So you're effectively giving Jon Stewart Kyle Rayner's origin story, which then begs the question, how the fuck do you plan on introducing Kyle Rayner now? So there's a plethora of reasons as to why Hal Jordan simply needs to come back and why Jon Stewart should not be the main Lantern after Hal Jordan becomes Parallax. He can be the main Lantern on the Justice League because that's something that actually happens and makes sense, but he should not be the main Green Lantern that the story follows for the Lantern side of DC. So for me, I'm genuinely hoping that at the end of Lantern Season 1, we do get a tease to Kyle Rayner or even an introduction to Kyle Rayner. And if it's not in Season 1, it needs to happen at the beginning of Season 2. And I'm 100% certain that James Gunn, Tom King, and everyone on the creative team for Lanterns has seen all of the backlash from Hal Jordan fans about their direction for Hal in this show. I'm hoping that if Green Lantern Rebirth wasn't already in the cards for post-Lantern Season 1, that it is now, because hopefully they see that we need Hal Jordan in this universe, because the Green Lantern mythos is going to be butt juice if he's not in it. And it also wouldn't make any sense and would simply be counterproductive to alienate half of the Green Lantern fandom in the DCU, because let's face it, a lot of people are Hal Jordan fans and a lot of people are Jon Stewart fans. But if you just kill off Hal, you're effectively giving the Hal Jordan fans like next to zero reason to care about the Lantern mythos in the DCU. So please, James Gunn, Tom King, if any of you guys come across this video, I hope that this Parallax theory is true. And if it is true, please, after Lantern Season 1, give us Green Lantern Rebirth and bring Hal Jordan back into the fold. This is coming from a concerned DCU fan who has liked most of what the DCU has produced so far. I am begging you guys to make this happen because it will be better for everyone. Like seriously, just imagine an event like Blackest Night, but Hal Jordan isn't in it. How does that even make sense? So again, for the 1,000,000th time, please save Hal Jordan. Just have him die as Parallax and have him come back later in a Green Lantern Rebirth fashion as a younger actor in his prime. You can still have Hal Jordan be in his 40s, but actually just cast him as like a 40-year-old actor so that he can stay around for the rest of the DCU. But that's going to do it for my Yab session. I'm hoping that this Parallax theory is true so that we can get Green Lantern Rebirth in the future. And that way the Green Lantern mythos in the DCU can be saved and we can get the peak that is in Jeff Johns' 2005 run. That being said, if you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and also hit the hype button if you have that feature available. And until next time, it's been your boy K the God.